So, good morning, everyone. I have the pleasure of being the last one before lunch as well, so I will be quick. Our project is about challenging Watson to become a privacy expert. And I wear two hats, well, more than two, actually. But one of them's in the volunteership world, and that's where I do a lot of work in privacy. I also have been publishing in privacy for the last 15 years, and on the other side, following up on Sharia's presentation, I also direct a Master of Technology, Entrepreneurship, and Innovation program, so there are a mixture of things going on here. So we saw some really nice presentations yesterday where people talked about the value of privacy governance, and actually Richard, he underlined it. And you saw some debates as to whether chief data officers and CIOs should be responsible, or CEOs be directly responsible for governance, security and privacy governance of data. And our field really is that everybody needs to be responsible. That just having point people, privacy officers, security officers, etc., is not going to be enough. And so what we'd like to do is to ensure that the people who are really close to releasing the code, releasing the data, etc., that they're also very aware. And so our first thought was that we should create a corpus in Watson to help software engineers understand privacy. And of course, there is a big debate in literature and around the communities around the world about how to map from abstract principles to actual software engineering speak, let's say. And so that software engineers will understand what are the principles and how can they translate them. So in addition to this idea that we can help Watson help itself, around privacy and big data and so forth. We're also looking at what's happening in the world, right? So here's Gartner predicting that people by 2017 will be, 80% of consumers will be bartering their data. And, what they don't put there is whether they're knowingly or unknowingly bartering the data, right? My sense is that unknowingly might be one of the words that should be there. And so, because we know that when a consumer looks at an app on a mobile phone, let's say, they can go through a number of different platforms, right, as you see on this illustration. Well, the software engineers are also working in isolation too, right? So they may be working on one of these platforms, or maybe just a little subset of one of these platforms, and they don't really understand, how the whole picture forms around the privacy aspects. And so we want to help them understand. So there's a lot of complexity here. There's so much complexity that the privacy experts that exist in the world right now can't really get their head around it. And so maybe a cognitive system like Watson might do so, and it might be able to help those privacy experts as well. So should business care, of course, we're seeing that's the case. So PricewaterhouseCoopers talked about how penalties went up about tenfold just in the United States, from 80 million to 800 million in the last year. We know that legislation is coming in Europe around privacy by design within their data protection laws, so we imagine that those figures are going to really skyrocket, and so organizations will care enough to want, I think, to help their software engineers understand how to embed privacy into software. So there are tough questions that software engineers may ask. They may say, okay, well, how can I learn about what are the privacy requirements for this particular application? Okay, and so they might start off, well, what are privacy requirements? It's a loaded question. It's a tough question because context matters so much, and so we need to add context. Well, privacy requirements for what domain, in what country, etc., right? And so all of a sudden it gets large, right? Because if you think about privacy requirements, they span the gamut from regulations all the way to user preferences. And so you can think about it as, you know, in this onion graphic that I have here, you have got international type laws, you've got national federal laws, you've got those around privacy and security and interacting with state and province laws, you've got industry-specific laws, and then again, depending on the amount of control that you're given, and you're seeing more and more of that happening with mobile applications, particularly from Apple, for example, giving more preferences around privacy for users and more control, then it means that, again, the requirements become, you know, more and more complex. And so if we think about having to put these documents and create a corpus in Watson, it's a staggering job across countries. Because if you think about even just in Canada, we've got different laws across every single province. With respect, for example, health sectors, it's different from every single province. And so we're talking about a lot of data going in there. And in addition to that, we're talking about definitions that are not level, they're not normalized. And so to create a high quality corpus, it means that we've got to go to the standards organizations and we've got to do some leveling, because even different privacy standards from different standard organizations, the definitions are different. And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done up front, and as Sharia was mentioned, that quality of that corpus is so important to the results. And of course, the other aspect that our teams will address will be around the interaction through the training with the questions. So if you ask, well, what are privacy requirements? There'll be a whole lot of sample questions right below the drop-down list that says, well, what are privacy requirements in healthcare in West Virginia? Or for a particular data flow from one country to another country, a transnational data flow, etc. And so, then you can help the user narrow down so that they can get the answers that they're looking for. Okay. These are some simpler queries we'd like to put in afterwards from the consumer perspective. We will start from the organizational perspective, first of all, which is staggering enough with respect to preparing that data. And this slide I slipped in there to show you the range of work that we'll undertake with respect to the technical aspects of privacy when we go from regulations and mapping it all the way down to the code and the control, the implementation, the functional implementation of the controls that are required in software in order to preserve privacy. And these controls can be privacy-preserving data mining controls. They can be controls for anonymization or the identification. They could be controls around purpose, specification, and they can be manual controls. They can be automatic controls, the whole gamut. Okay. So this slide basically talks to our ability, we hope, to use that cognitive software to create something that we have never envisioned before creating, and we think that now that there may be some reality to it. I remember writing an application about 10 years ago where we were talking about some legal leveling, and we also had some technical pieces, but I tell you, it was a legal piece that the evaluators were most concerned about, and I think at this point in time that with a cognitive system we can actually crack that nut. So we're very excited about that. And so this slide simply talks to what we have seen in progress for privacy to date. It's too slow and underfunded, and how important privacy engineering is to the big data field and actually to commerce and to our freedoms as societies that are increasingly going online. So we're hoping that we can set up Watson as a privacy SAR, and that it can help itself release all the nuggets of information around the open data from different governments and so forth, and so that we can go forward in what Anne Kavukian talks as a positive sum scenario. Thank you. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Questions? Anyone?
No. Yeah. Yes. So I chair Privacy by Design documentation for software engineers committee. So we've been doing a lot of document creation and linking documents that are actually necessary for building a good corpus. And so the preparation work is in place. And it's an international committee with end users, with a lot of technology organizations on it, a lot of individuals who are committed to privacy. So we've got an extremely important group of people that we can tap into to help us build this corpus and also raise the funding for the students to work on the project and so forth. Yeah.
Anyone else? I think they're hungry.
Sorry?
I think they're hungry.
They're hungry, yeah, I think so, right before lunch too. But I can say one more thing, Richard, is that when you talk about students as co-producers and collaborators, this is an exceedingly collaborative project, and we will need that kind of thinking and collaboration as we move forward in it. Yeah.
Thanks for this, Don.
Welcome.